Hey everybody, Eric with MountModernLife.com. I hope you guys are doing great today. Now, if you caught last week's video, we showed you how we created our DIY sliding barn door kit here in our RV. But we also mentioned that we were really interested in trying an actual sliding barn door hardware kit that you could purchase. Mainly because there's a couple things that kind of stick out with this door. They're not deal breakers, but we wanted to try the actual kit to see if it could eliminate some of those and if it's a better option. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and pull down this version and go ahead and put the actual kit up. Now there may be some modifications that we need to make to the actual door as we go along, and we'll go ahead and show you that. But the ultimate goal here is that at the end of this video, you'll have two different versions that you can look at, and we'll talk about the pros and cons of each for us, so that hopefully if you're looking to create a project like this in your RV, you can decide which direction is going to work best for you. But anyway, let's go ahead and get the DIY version out so we can get the kit out. A mini sliding barn door kit, a door, a header board, now this is optional, a nail gun, now you should only use the nail gun if you want to use a header board, a drill, drill bits, a socket wrench set, adjustable floor guide, this is also optional depending on if you want to use the one that comes with the kit. So we have the old DIY hardware out, and now it's time to get the new in. So the first thing we're going to do is actually add a header, which is essentially a board that's going to go all the way across, and that's what we're going to attach the barn door hardware to. Now the thing is this is optional, but we're going this route for a couple different reasons. One is that the actual screws that came with the hardware that attaches to the wall are a little bit too long for our RV walls, so they basically poke through on the other side. So by adding this 3/4 inch here, it's going to actually make it so that doesn't happen, which is pretty awesome. And number two is that in our doorway, there's no attachment area across the top. So by adding this board, if necessary, we'll be able to go ahead and add an extra screw right here through the hardware that'll add extra support. Now with our header here, we actually did one side stain that matches the outside walls here, but then the other side we actually stained to match the door, and that'll be the side that goes towards the bathroom. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and get this header installed. All right, now that our header's in place, it's time to move on to installing the hardware. But real quick before we did that, we did want to touch on the hardware kit that we're using. And we actually picked it up from Amazon, and we're using a mini barn door or sliding barn door kit. Now, the thing is with the mini ones is that they're definitely a lot more lightweight, and they're a lot shorter in the length of the rail. So ours is 5 feet, which is going to be pretty much perfect for this area. And they don't need as much clearance at the top. Some of the bigger, heavier duty sliding barn door kits will need like 6 to 8 inches above where it's actually going to slide. And with the mini ones, you don't need as much, which is awesome. Now, one thing to keep in mind though, if you are going to go with the mini sliding barn door kit, is that it generally doesn't handle as much weight. So for example, the one we're going to be installing handles about 75 pounds. Now, I think our door is roughly around 50, so hopefully it works all right. If anything goes haywire, we'll let you know, but it should be good to go. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and move forward, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and drill some pilot holes for the rail, and then we're going to go ahead and use the bolts that they included to get those attached up here. So let's dive into that. All right, so hopefully you guys don't have to do this, but the bolts that came with it were a little bit too long to just go through just this board. which was good for these other sections because we wanted it to go through our header and into the wall. But right here in the middle, we don't have a wall behind it. So with the screws they gave us, it's just way too long and it would stick too far out. So I went through all of our old hardware we had down below, and I found a silver one that fits the washer and everything perfectly. It's just not as long. So in an ideal world, it's not going to go all the way through the wood. But anyway, we're going to go ahead and use this smaller one just to make sure that it's attached and there's no wobble here. But something to keep in mind, if you guys are finding that the screws are too long, you can go to a hardware store, check your screw bag or however you want to call it, to find something a little bit shorter. But anyway, we're going to get this in place. So since our screw is silver, we're going to go ahead and give it a little black paint to make it kind of match in a little bit more. Now that the rail's installed, it's time to move on to the door. And the first thing we're going to do is remove the eye hooks and the wheels, and then we'll get to attaching the hardware that connects the rail to the door. All right, so right here we have our bracket, and this rides on the rail that we put up, and then these connect to our door here. So after looking at the instructions, you'll see this first screw hole right here. Well, technically from this to the top of the door is supposed to be 1 1/8 inch. So I went ahead and made 2 markings on each side of the door, 3 1/4 inch in on each side. But in order to do that, we're going to have to make a modification to our door, and we're going to have to remove our decorative trim piece right here and slide it down. So what we're going to do is pop this off, install these where they're supposed to be, and then go ahead and reinstall this underneath. So anyway, let's dive into it. Now that we got the decorative piece off, it's time to attach these. All right, now that we have those in there, we'll go ahead and reattach this decorative piece right here below. All right, let's get this up there. And there it is. Now, I don't know if you guys could hear when I was sliding it back and forth, that little almost like sand sound. But what it actually is our side trim pieces here. We have those in, and we have them, I don't know if you remember from our last video, but we had them stick out on the bathroom side a little more in order to block the peripheral view into the bathroom. Well, what's happening is those stick out far enough to where they're nudging up against our header that we put into place. So we're going to go ahead and kind of sand down this top just a little bit because it's barely rubbing up against it. And then after we get that sanded down, then we shouldn't have that as a problem. All right, so giving it that little sanding works, so now it no longer hits the header. So let's go ahead and move on to the stoppers. So we got it moved over a little bit further, so now we're going to put our stopper right here on the edge and tighten it down. All right, so we want our stopper more on this side over here because we want it to be in perfect position so that when you open the, or when you close the door, it stops it right when it's perfectly closed. But in order to get the stopper where we need it, we're gonna have to remove this bolt so we can slide past it and then put the bolt back in. Now that the bolt's back in place, we're going to go ahead and close the door to where we'd like it to be closed, which is about right there. Slide our stopper over, get its position. right, so now we're putting our little plugs on the top. Now what these are gonna do is we're gonna install them right on top of the door here. And then what happens is that the rail's right there. So if whenever, for whatever reason, there's like a bump or a shake in the RV, if the wheels come up off the rail will hit this on the bottom side so that the wheels can't come fully off, so that the door will always stay attached to the rail. So these are next. As you can see in that clip, last night our stopper actually flew off and broke, which really sucks. So last night, Katie and I actually kind of epoxied it back together in order to get something up there and hold. But what's really cool is we did reach out to the company, and they already have a new stopper on its way for us to replace this with. So that's pretty cool. It sucks that it happened in the first place, but at least it's getting rectified pretty quick. But something just to keep in mind if you guys are going to go with this specific barn door kit. But anyway, so we had to wait till today regardless, because our last step is actually putting in the track guide for the door. And what that's going to do is basically keep it from going in and out like this, and keep it in one solid path. And the track guide that came with it is actually this one here. As you see here, the way it works is you actually drill it into the floor, and then you're supposed to cut out a groove in the bottom of your door so that this standing up part actually rides through that groove, and that'll keep the door from swaying back and forth. Well, Katie and I really didn't want to drill into the ground or into the floor, and we also didn't want to cut a groove in the door. So we were looking on Amazon, and there's a ton of adjustable track guides out there, and we actually picked this one up. So this one's a little different in that it drills or screws into the wall versus into the floor. And what's really cool is you're actually able to take this wheel and move it in and out. So we did try it, and it is large enough for us to get the door in there. We're actually gonna have to scoot it this way a little bit. But anyway, let's go ahead and get this installed and get it all finished up. All right, so in order to get this on in the right position, we needed to adjust it. And in order to do that, we needed to remove our spacer, the wheel itself, and the nut that goes on the top, which is right here. But in doing so, what I think I figured out is that the easiest way to do this is to actually install this against the wall and then get this in position and tighten down. So in order to do that, we're gonna need to remove the door. But in order to figure out exactly where we positioned it, what we did is we took our bracket and we slid it into place, and then we found the spot where the wheel will touch the door when it's fully closed and when it's fully opened, so the door makes it to each different closed and open point, if that makes sense. So anyway, once we got the position there, I took a pencil and I went ahead and marked on the wall the sideline here so that I know where the bracket needs to be installed. So now we're going to move the door, install the bracket into the wall, and then we'll come back and adjust the actual distance from the wall that the wheel needs to be. So let's do that. So instead of taking the door completely off, we're just going to loosen this stopper up and slide it down so that the door can get out of it. So the screws that came with the floor guide are actually a little bit too long, and they'll probably go all the way through our walls. So what we're going to do is actually use the screws that came with the floor guide that came with the sliding barn door kit. Anyway, let's get this installed. What are you doing, buddy?
Just to get through.
There you going, dude. You want some loving? Dance in the middle of something right now. Huh? Oh, there he goes. There he goes. All right, so now I've gotten this semi-tight in the position it needs, and I'm using the wheel on top just as a guide. And for us, the main point is this back section over here near the kitchen. We have a trim piece that needs to be in position, and it can't be past that. So right there is where we need to be. So now I'm going to go ahead and reinstall this wheel, get this bolt tightened down, and we'll be good and ready to go. With the new hardware installed, we're going to have to end up moving up our door latch here, which keeps the door in place and secure while we're driving down the road. And there it is, all latched in and ready to hit the road. Time to get the stopper back in position, and then we'll come back and let you know what we think. All right, so here we are. Our sliding barn door hardware is all installed and everything is ready to go. So we just wanted to take a second and talk about our pros and cons. And we're going to start with the cons, which number one is that it does take a lot more parts in order to install this in the DIY version, but it is relatively simple to do, so it's not that big of a con. The fact that one of our stoppers broke, now that really sucks. The good news about that is that the company was really responsive and really quick about shipping us out a new one. So we're going to have to kind of wait and see till when we get the new one installed and see how it holds up over time. And then another one is that we did have to order extra parts in the floor guide. Now, the main reason we did that was kind of, personal optional, and we wanted to go that route rather than drilling into the floor, but just something to keep in mind. And this next grouping of things that I'm going to talk about is more just something to look out for in your specific situation. So for Katie and I, on either side of our actual doorway, we don't have a ton of room as far as space. And our door needed to be a specific size in order to cover the opening. So that kind of makes it a little bit to where the door is actually bigger than both side pieces, which is a little frustrating, but nothing to do with the hardware. But where that does kind of tie into the hardware is that we have this trim piece over here on the side, and it sticks out about 1/4 of an inch further than the wall itself. So when we're opening and closing the door and needing the door to go past the actual wall space we have, it does require that we put our floor guide a little bit further out so we don't get like a full snug against the wall close. But that's more specific to our situation, but we just wanted to make sure that as you guys are going this route, just something to keep in mind and think of moving forward. So with our door specifically, we could have almost combated that. So with our DIY version, it came off a little bit further. So we needed to have this trim hang over on the bathroom side, which we talked about in the DIY video. But if we were making the door specifically for the barn door hardware, we could have probably made the trim flush with the door and we could have got a little bit closer even. But just something to think about. Now, as far as the pros go, we definitely like the hardware that we purchased and just installed more than the DIY version. There's a couple reasons. One is that it definitely is a lot quieter when it slides back and forth. And if you did watch the DIY video, I kind of shook the RV a little bit, and you could really hear a rattle as the door, when it was closed, would really go back and forth. Now, it didn't do that when it was open, but when it was closed, if there was any sort of shake in the RV, it would rattle and make a lot of noise. Whereas here with this one, it doesn't at all. There's maybe a little tapping on the bottom, but nothing compared to the other version. So we really like that. And then on top of that, with the door that we created, we do have a lot of black accents, which go really good with the sliding barn door hardware being black metal. It just really completes the look that we were going for. So overall, we're big fans of the barn door hardware. And if you guys are going to take this approach, it's maybe just a couple of dollars more. And that's even if you do buy the extra floor guide instead of using the one that comes with the kit. It'll still only be a couple dollars more than the DIY version. So anyway, that's kind of where we're at here. If we were to do this all over again, we would just start with the hardware kit and not do the DIY version, though it did serve us very well for quite a few years. But anyway, that about wraps it up for today. I really hope that this video was helpful for you guys. As always, if you have any questions or comments, definitely feel free to let us know below or visit us at mountainmodernlife.com. And as always, again, thanks for swinging by. Don't forget to subscribe, and we'll see you again soon. Big cat in a little box. The trouble I've seen, nobody knows. The sorrow. What are you doing?